Britain's growing obesity epidemic, England's chief medical officer has suggested it may be necessary to introduce a tax on sugar.
Well, Katie Fawcett is outside a sugar factory in Nottinghamshire. Sugar, of course, the cause of so many health problems, Katie.
Well, more than 1 million tonnes of sugar is produced at factories like this across the UK, but of course sugar in itself isn't a problem. It's how much of it is added to foods by manufacturers and how many of those products we then eat. Now, at the moment, the World Health Organization says that sugar shouldn't constitute any more than 10% of our daily calorie intake. Now, that could include a serving of pop, which is actually only 2/3 of this bottle, or a regular-sized chocolate bar. But today, one of the proposals we're expecting is that they're going to half this recommendation, and that's because of the links between sugar, diabetes and obesity. Now, there are 2.9 million people across the UK with diabetes at the moment, and that number is expected to go up by about 5 million by 2025. And most of those people will have type 2 diabetes, which is linked to obesity. Now, of course, getting manufacturers to half their sizes could be very difficult, and that's what the Chief Medical Officer is worried about. And she's concerned that perhaps the only way to get tough on soft drink manufacturers and sugary foods is to put a tax on them.
Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Hillary is here alongside Dr. Aseem Malhotra from the Action on Sugar group. Good to see both of you. Thank you for joining us. Do you think this is a good idea, taxing sugar?
Well, I wholeheartedly welcome these calls from Professor Sally Davis. We know that sugar has no nutritional value. Contrary to what the food industry want us to believe, you do not require any carbohydrate from added sugar. But also, as your reporter has already mentioned, we have a real problem with type 2 diabetes, which is currently costing the NHS close to 20 billion indirectly in direct costs, and that's set to double by 2035. We can learn lessons from tobacco. I mean, we know that taxing tobacco has reduced consumption.
Right.
I can tell you many instances of patients that have come to me that have suffered heart attacks, that have been smokers. We've advised them to stop smoking. I've seen them a few months later in clinic and said, have you stopped smoking? And have said, to be honest, doc, I can't afford it anymore, but I feel healthier and happier because of it, and I can spend more money on holidays now.
But sugar's in almost all the food we eat.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we don't even know it's there.
Well, in some ways you can argue the sugar issue is worse now because you're absolutely right. It's added to a lot of processed foods, and what happens is it limits choice. And if you don't have choice, how can people exercise personal responsibility? So I think, the government have a duty and responsibility to protect children in particular from the manipulations and excesses of the food industry. And what Dame Sally Davis has also said, which I find very alarming, is that this could be the first generation of children that are outlived by their parents, because we know 1 in 3 children now, by the time they leave primary school, are overweight or obese.
It's terrifying, isn't it? But like everything that's bad for you, we like it. That's why we eat it. We love sugar. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
So, but Hillary, is taxing it a good idea? What do you think?
Well, it's going to be difficult to tax it because, as you say, sugar's in everything. You're not going to tax sugar in a banana because that's a natural source of sugar. And just because people eat too much sugar, if we tax that and stop them eating sugar, they might overconsume on starch. And starch has got the same calories per gram as sugar. So, we need to stop over-consuming everything. But certainly sugar is a problem. It's got, as we've heard, no nutritional value, and it's there in hidden amounts in things you wouldn't expect. So a can of baked beans will contain the equivalent of 6 teaspoons of sugar, a homemade curry, another 3, 200 mils of fruit juice, 4 teaspoons of sugar.
See, I think people would be shocked by that, especially with fruit juice.
Absolutely.
Do you think you're actually taking something that's healthy?
Barbecue sauces, ketchups, things like that.
I would agree with Dr. Hillary that actually, this isn't really about all sugars. So sugars are what we're intrinsic in foods, like whole fruit and vegetables, not a problem.
Right.
The problem is really with added sugar. And we have lots of studies now telling us that if you consume 150 calories of added sugar, that is 11 times more potent, increasing the risk of type 2 diabetes compared to calories from another source.
And do you know what? Oftentimes they'll say things like fat-free.
Yeah.
And fat-free, you have to look at the label because oftentimes they've added loads and loads of sugar in there as well. Now, what about this one? We've been talking about food, and this in the front of the Telegraph, which is a high-protein diet as bad for health as smoking. They're now telling us that this is bad for us. What can we eat?
The newspapers are really having a field day today, making us worried about everything being dangerous. And again, if your protein comes largely in the form of lentils and pulses, beans, nuts, seeds, that's much better, healthier protein.
Yeah, but it doesn't for
if
most
you're
people, does
eating
it?
red meat all day, every day.
Yeah. But a lot of
everything
people
in
have cut down. A lot of people have gone for that sort of protein-rich diet,
in order to cut down on
thinking
carbohydrates.
that's healthier.
Yes.
And now we're told it's not. No wonder people are confused.
Well, I mean, it's certainly important to have a moderate intake of protein, and particularly as you get over 65, because your body can't absorb so much protein, and you get muscle wasting and more likely to have falls and problems if you don't get enough protein later on. But when you're younger, they are suggesting that too much protein is a harmful thing.
Okay.
And if it's processed protein, if it's full of fat as well, then probably that's true. But it's what have we always said? Moderation in everything.
Exactly. Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. Hillary said that for years.
Yeah.
Common sense.
And all four of us sitting here, lean, trim. We're setting a good example. No, I mean it.
Yeah, right. Thank you both very much indeed. You too are.
Good to
Not
see
too
you.
sure about us.
Hey, don't drag me into it.
Not too sure about us. Right, OK, it is 27 minutes past 7.